Once I dreamt my father back to life, sea green robes around him. He met me at my bus stop. He smiled, muttered something, and walked with me up the street to home. His eyes still sunk into black rings on his face from when he was sick. I once sleepwalked to that same bus stop when he was still alive, practicing for when he died.
The nursery and all of the trees cross over the dark, and some old parking lots hold my whimpering thoughts, and I'm on the next train. You and me, can't you see what this means? In the light of a torch, realize nothing is forced, nothing is forced.
Hello everybody, it's Summer Camp Steve once again. So, the other day I messaged Lee and I asked him, hey man, you got any specific topics on the back burner? Perhaps I can do a story. Kind of with the mindset of an interview or something like that, but Lee's response was a suggestion of toys that I enjoyed as a kid and Arizona. We'll get to the toys later. I want to start with Arizona because I think that Lee knows what Arizona means to me. But the reason that I am excited to share this story is because I haven't shared this story, especially not the whole story, with a lot of people, and especially people close to me, because I don't want them to worry about me. Anyways, so I've spent a lot of time at this off-the-grid camping site, abandoned military base out in Southern California. And my first time out there, the hippie kids, there's rainbow kids, and I always kind of thought these kind of things were movies, but it's true, it exists. I saw a school bus that was painted all psychedelic colors, and it had the frame of a Volkswagen van on top of it, so then you could climb up there as if it was this little loft area, and all the seats had been taken out inside, and there was this kitchen and beanbag chairs everywhere, kids with dreadlocks and instruments and dogs, and one of those plastic giant jars of either pretzels or cheese balls, but it was filled with marijuana, of course. Anyways, that stuff really does exist. I've seen it, and I was very intrigued by it at the time. I had my hair long, I was doing all the hippy dippy shit, and so I'm camping out off the grid, and I come across these people that are going for the end of the world ceremony at the Mayan calendars in Guatemala or whatever. So this is back in 2012. This is Halloween weekend. And so decide randomly to go with a group of kids, and we get in an RV and we head off to Arizona, where we're going to cross the border there. And the people that I was with, I really only knew two of them. One of them I knew that since I'd been there for like a month or so. The other was my girlfriend at the time, and then a couple other guys that I just met that day. So we traveled to Phoenix and Tucson within, it's probably like a 3-day trip. And we make our money by busking and panhandling and gas jugging. If you haven't heard of gas jugging, it's similar to panhandling, but as you can imagine, with gasoline instead of money. So what they would do, I didn't do this actually very much, and they didn't like that. I wasn't willing to go up to people. I didn't have the courage to ask them for money or gasoline. But anyways, gas jugging. We'd hang out at a gas station for a couple hours. One of them would go up to someone once they start filling their car, be like, "Hey, can you spare a couple squirts?" And they would oblige, and they would fill up our gas can, and we'd dump it into the RV and then keep going. So, and they'd be panhandling as well. Over our trip of 3 days, we accumulated $400 collectively. And so we're in downtown Arizona. Like I mentioned, it is Halloween weekend, and we're along one of the college campuses. All the college kids are out. They're all in costumes. They are filling the streets. There are hardly any cars driving, and we are the only ones not in costumes. And I'm starting to realize that the people that I'm with are not these rainbow kids that I've fallen in love with. They were what I learned later. They were Dreambow kids, rainbow wannabes that are just fun money suckers. They suck fun and money. Anyways, so I'm starting to realize that I don't appreciate these guys and their mannerisms as much as I had originally anticipated. And they're already starting not to like me since I'm not accumulating much money. Although I never felt like I was in the way. I definitely shared what I had. I bought a few meals here and there, and they got mad at me when I bought a soda, a Coca-Cola, and they got upset at me for not, sharing that, even though it was 89 cents. Anyways, doesn't matter. The chemistry just wasn't there. So one morning we're out in the middle of nowhere in southern Arizona, and where we plan to cross the border, we're about 10 miles away from the border. I am one of two of us that do not have passports, but we decided to worry about that later. We figured it's easy to get out, and I don't know, maybe it'll be harder to get back in. But we'd also talked about sailing a boat to Hawaii and then just get back in that way, I guess. Anyways, one morning we're out in the middle of nowhere. Like I said, the chemistry wasn't there. So me and my girlfriend at the time, we decided to get off because we don't like how these guys are acting. They were starting fights with people, and we didn't feel comfortable around them. And the thing that really upset me, like I said, I didn't appreciate being around them, but what really bothered me was when we left, and they were fine with it because they were happy that we were leaving. Right before we got off the RV, one of the guys checks the box that they were keeping the money in, and it was very clear the way that he looked at the money and counted it. He was checking to make sure that we hadn't stolen it, and that bothered me. That really bothered me a lot. Anyways, so we tell them that we're getting off, and we start walking down this road, and we decide that we don't care about going to the end of the world. We just want to get back to California. So we walk 10 miles down the middle of nowhere, Arizona. Finally, we get picked up. And the guy that picks us up, ironically, is also from Ohio. And his name is also Steve, which was really neat. And he said that the reason that he picked us up was because he had been living out there for over 20 years, driving that road every day to work, and he had never, ever in his life seen anybody walking on that road. Just to give you an idea of where we were. So Steve from Ohio drops us off at a truck stop and hands us $10, which was perfect because in comparison to where we were, truck stop was a hot spot, and we bought breakfast for both of us with that $10. We later get on the entrance ramp and put our thumbs out. This was my first time hitchhiking, by the way. We get a ride, but the lady only gives us a ride like 3 or 4 exits down the road, drops us off. We end up hanging out at that exit for 6 hours. Nightfall comes and we start walking the highway. We find a shopping cart and we put our backpacks in the shopping cart because we have those hiking backpacks, and we both have instruments with us. She had a ukulele and I had a guitar, and our packs were heavy just by themselves, so we put them in the shopping cart and we walk another 5 or 10 miles, get off at an exit, and like I said, it was nighttime, so we're starting to get hungry, starting to try to find somewhere to sleep. So we stop at a Jack in a Box. We kind of tell them our story a little bit, and we ask them for a meal. This was also the first and one of the few times I'd ever asked for a meal, and I'll tell you, it's quite the different perspective when you're on the road with nothing. Well, with no money. I had clothes and an instrument and someone that loved me, so I felt good about that. Anyways, we asked for a meal, and not only do they give us something, but they give us the deluxe burgers with full order of fries and sodas. Felt very fortunate for the meal that they had granted us with, and the meal that Steve had granted us with, and the ride that he had given us to at the truck stop. We weren't very grateful for the ride from the truck stop because that resulted in a 6-hour wait. Anyways, doesn't matter. After we go to the Jack in the Box, we start looking for somewhere to sleep. We went to a church. We knocked on the door. No one answered. We see signs for a park, so we start walking down the road. And this is kind of borderline suburban area. We're walking down this dark road that doesn't have any street lights, and suddenly 2 cop cars with their lights on come flying past us, and they go all the way down to the end of the road, and we can see that, oh, okay, that's the park that we heard about. We can go there and sleep, but we don't really want to do that if those cops are there. And then this shadow figure, this guy comes out of not nowhere, but it was just so dark it felt like it. And he was clearly just at the park, and he informs us about the cops. He kind of acts like we're silly for even heading that way. He's like, hey, the cops are over there, right? You be careful. So we decide not to go to the park. We find a little wash area. So like in between the little developments of a suburb where the terrain isn't strong enough for any building structures, and the sand is pretty soft. We found a nice little tucked away hidden area, and we slept on the sand. That was my second night in Arizona, sleeping on the sand. And maybe it was just because of how tired I was, but I slept pretty well both those nights out in the desert, I gotta tell you. And, the hardest part of this trip wasn't the disappointment of the people that I surrounded myself with. It wasn't the shameful perspective of asking people for money, or not having any money, or being on the road with no way to get anywhere. But it was that, like I mentioned, it was Halloween weekend, and which is around the time of my mom's birthday. And my girlfriend at the time had a cell phone, so I did call my mom. I called her while we were waiting 6 hours for a ride, and I told her what we were doing, but I'm sure I sugarcoated a lot of it. But that was one of the hard parts for me because, like I mentioned, I don't want people to worry about me, especially not my mom. Anyway, so we're asleep in this wash area. We wake up the next morning. We go to a Waffle House. We ask these sweet old ladies for a meal, and they give us waffles and breakfast and coffee. They were so helpful and so generous. We go onto the entrance ramp. We ask, we are putting our thumbs out asking for a ride. Not even 5 minutes and the cops come and they tell us to move along. And right as the cops are leaving, someone that's getting onto the entrance ramp stops at one of the fork in the road and backs up to us and asks us about the cops, like, hey, did they just tell you to leave? And I said, yeah, and he expresses his hatred for the cops. And he tells us to get in. So we're like, awesome, man. He's like, yeah, we're going, you guys going west? We're like, yeah, we're going to California. And so we get in, and turns out that he's been traveling quite a bit, and he's been making his money with a different strategy. His strategy is going to Walmart, grabbing stuff off the shelf, returning it to customer service for a gift card, which you could buy food with that, and then if you went to a Sam's Club, you could buy gas with it, which, I don't know. I'm not too intrigued by either strategy of gas jugging, panhandling, or returning things, but I don't know. I was still impressed, nonetheless. Anyways, so that was his strategy of getting across the states. We finally make it back to California. This guy doesn't really have anywhere to go, so he camps out not too far from our campsite. He ends up causing a little trouble here and there with a few of the people in the community, like just tiny little things, making a lot of noise late at night, like driving his pickup truck and getting his pickup truck stuck, and then having like 3 different people pull him out and stuff like that. So he's just not really building a very good reputation amongst the community. And one day I see a friend, and he says, hey, that Alan guy that you brought in? And I'm like, yeah, what about him? He said, the cops just took him away. It turned out that he had a stolen vehicle, excuse me, he had a stolen vehicle with stolen plates, and he was on probation. And with a bunch of stuff that he had done in Mississippi. So we searched his name on Google because I was Mr. Investigator and memorized his last name because of a little badge that I saw on his pickup truck. Yeah, what up? Anyways, we look up his name and we find his mug shot. I can't believe I was in the car with this guy, and this now actually explains why when we went through Border Patrol between Arizona to California, this is why he asked me to drive for him. And which he had said at the time that his license was expired. And I was thinking, hey, he's giving us this ride. What, the least I can do is help him out. So he gets arrested and he's gone and away. And I'm fortunately back in California in time for Halloween, which was an excellent time. And I don't know what happened to the rest of those guys. About 2 or 3 weeks later, it's a weird feeling. So I'm actually, I go into one of the school buses, one of the rainbow school buses, And I've been used to there always being like maybe one person out of the 8 that I didn't know. It's whatever. I sit down and I'm sitting down across from this guy. And I start to kind of recognize him, but the sun's kind of in my eyes and I can't really quite see him. And he's looking at me and he's grinning. He's grinning right at me. And he's directly across from me. So I figure, okay, maybe I do know this guy. I felt like I was flipped around. It was the guy that was driving the RV that I was on. And he revealed to me that shortly after I had seen him, he and the rest of the guys crossed the border. He was the other one, other than me, that didn't have his passport. And shortly after they crossed the border, all of them split up. He told me a story about them trying to get weed, and one guy, they met someone on the street that they were trying to get weed from, and this stranger that they met went into the house to get them weed and came out with a stab wound. I am so glad I didn't stay on the RV with them. They said that they got in and left right then, and people chased them out of there. And then shortly after that, they all got freaked out and went their separate ways. He then spent 3 weeks in Mexico, right along the border. He sold his RV, and fortunately someone was able to help him out until he could get enough credentials to get across the border, which he had significantly more trouble getting back into America, as you can imagine. Obviously, he eventually made it back. It was haunting to me to already be in a structure, sitting down without realizing who I was in the presence of this person that had such a gut-wrenching experience for me. And suddenly it was there. And to like top it all off too, in my defense, a lot of the reason I didn't recognize him, he had gotten a haircut and shave and everything too. And that was even the scarier part too, For what it's worth, I no longer have such a resentful mindset on Arizona since I have returned. All those times were great. I had a lot of fun times, but the first time that I returned, it was like returning to a graveyard or a crime site, or my head was spinning the first time I returned to Arizona. And I think that a part of Lee knows that. And that's why he asked me to talk about it. I'm glad to share this story, whether you feel exclusive or just, I don't know, I hope you're tickled in some way. If not, that's okay. I thank you for your patience and your time. And I thank you for listening. My name's Summer Camp Steve. You're listening to Nursery Podcast, Ohio's creative voice.
Hey guys, this is Lee Boyle, the regular host of Nursery. I hope you enjoyed my brother's story about Arizona, and I want to remind you that now my band Third Class's new album is out on double LP vinyl, my friend. Go to thirdclass.net and check out the 20-song collection of poetic traveling Ohioanism, Virginia's Playlist. Thirdclass.net, double LP for $30, well worth the money. Go order your copy today. Third Class, Virginia's Playlist. Thanks for listening to Nursery. Look, Mom, we're on a podcast.